All right. Well, it's afternoon now where I'm at. I'm about to finish up a series of videos on the changing images of man. Um, the last chapter video about that earlier today, and I'm just gonna go ahead and get on with it. Talk about their summary and the appendices at the end of this book. And the summary that they've put at the end of the book, summary of all the chapters and what they had to say. They stress their focus on the importance of images of man, because those images, people of themselves, as being what they are, and the purpose they have is to underlie the ways in which the society shapes its institutions, educates its young, and goes about whatever it perceives its business to be. So that's a quote from them where they underlie the ways in which the society shapes its institutions, educates its young, and goes about whatever it perceives its business to be. They mostly seem to perceive people's business to be to evolve and to make the planet better. They admit they have concentrated mostly on images which derived from industrialism and science, and are exploring ways to transform them in order to further personal and cultural evolution. They decry the industrial and scientific era's attempt to negate or disprove spirituality, but praise its works in making survival less difficult. But they don't praise the Reformation as much as the Renaissance for its work in increasing people's ability to read, or for promoting individual freedom to choose a spiritual relationship with the God of the Bible. They do this dance around seeming to cherish education of the young and claim to not discount actual knowledge gained from actual science, while denying their vision of progress handed to the U.S. Federal Department of Education, in turn banned schools from teaching the Bible, repressed the scientific evidence of creation, and replaced it with teaching children false science, so-called science, of the Darwinian macroevolutionary theory and the Big Bang cosmology that they probably know made assumptions without evidence outside of the actual scientific method, and therefore was not actual knowledge gained through the actual scientific method, went outside the limits that they say they're aware of the scientific method. They claim to think societal regulation by requiring the application of powerful socio and psychotechnologies was going to be necessary, even if not good, while claiming in order for lives of people to be good, they'd have to force necessary changes that are not good, denying that they knew, if they actually studied history as they claim to have, that their plans have been attempted before and never made the world better for most. Just a few tyrants who temporarily were praised and made rich. They don't admit to wanting tyranny, but almost admit to thinking, like Satan, that God is the tyrant to be rebelled against. They claim to have examined how images of humankind have shaped societies in the past, but they in Chapter 2, Table 3, probably deliberately, denied or misrepresented the early Abrahamic Hebrews' real beliefs, and don't once in the book attempt to promote humans viewing themselves as created in the image of God, as having been beneficial to societies that have believed that, even while publishing a book in countries that were at least partially built on those beliefs, and while benefiting themselves from the blessings God gave to those countries, where the dominant yet peaceful and freedom-granting and human-loving image and lifestyle, culture, and institutions rooted in faith in Jesus created some of the best lives and countries for them to be lived in to ever exist on earth. Nope, they want a new empire ruled by humanism, scientism, technocracy, and old spiritualism to evolve humans into gods. They want Satanism and the wrath of God and Satan as long as they can. They thought they could and may avoid the wrath of man. They may avoid it somewhat by having it in them and carrying it out on the obstacle to their plan, people who trust Jesus Christ and don't trust them. They knew they might plan to, quote, increase the level of seeming disorder and chaos with their transformation. But they called it seeming disorder and chaos because other people's lives actually being disordered and chaotic, in their minds, wouldn't be real disorder and real chaos. Then, to them, they want self-esteem by warning people that they are just imagining this necessary evil transformation as bad because they don't get it. They want to think highly of themselves. And if people don't agree with them, they want them to think lowly of themselves. So that's basically the summary. And then there's an appendix by Elise Boulding, Appendix A. And it's basically her calling them out for their attempt to dismiss the real value of God's design for family and the wreck that other family types actually cause. So Appendix A starts with an alternative view of history, the spiritual dimension of the human person, and a third alternative image of humanness by Elise Boulding. She says, their image is incorrect. Me too, but not for the same reasons. She refers to a University of Chicago study, and others basically, that humans may not have started as hunter-gatherers, saying, quote, humans have the same intellectual, analytic, and spiritual intuitive skills at about the same capacity level for at least 12,000 years, end quote. Well, no, humans have been fully human since God formed Adam out of the dust and Eve out of Adam on the sixth day of creation, which was roughly, probably closer to 6,500 to 7,000 years ago. And Cain was a farmer, and Abel was a shepherd, and Adam a farmer and shepherd, or both. It was not until after Noah that God told people they could eat meat. So she was off by thinking there was a 10,000 BC, but correct to say agriculture was a thing humans did prior to hunting, as well as 3,500 BC being close to when urban-based kingdoms, cities, were begun. But when she says the first attempts to weave moral teachings into large-scale political organization came about 500, 200 BC with Buddha, Confucius, the Vedas, or Lao Tzu, she denies the Genesis 10 to 11 account of Nimrod, the Tower of Babel being, though not good morality, a moral political enterprise involving all living humans on Earth around 2500 BC, or the Egyptian Empire having their own religious morality politics before Joseph went there, and a denial of Moses in Exodus starting based on the Ten Commandments, a God-led nation political group, the Israelites, Hebrews, in Canaan around 1400 BC, or the Code of Hammurabi in Samaria, earlier, Mesopotamia. She thinks the authors did not credit Islam enough for their translations of Greek, but she ignores Native American tribal morals prior to Islam, Aztecs, Mayans, Hopi, etc. There was global, worldwide, Babylonian, first Tower of Babel, influence of ungodly morals directed by fallen angels and Satan long before Confucius or Lao Tzu. Not that they weren't misguided as well, they were. She sees the truth that society may have gotten more complex and there has not been spiritual evolution, but I guess she seems to state that there could be spiritual evolution, which is her not seeing the truth that humans can either serve God or other spirits or themselves or other people. And serving God helps humans, and we can grow and mature, not evolve. Serving false gods may seem like evolving, but leads to death and chaos. I do credit her for calling them out for confusing transpersonal and transcendental. Appendix B, Information Systems and Social Ethics by Jeffrey Vickers. He talks about them omitting the science of understanding a distinction between energy and information. Thus, he semi-calls out their pretending to not be materialists, yet scientific, while denying that science lets people know that information, logic, reason are not material. And this goes along with the Bible, which shows that even the communication of information, while for us to access it often requires vision and hearing, the still small voice that spoke to Elijah, and the information itself are beyond material. Elise Boulding in Appendix A called them out for confusing transpersonal for transcendental, because they think of humans as evolving to be divine, whereas the truth is we aren't divine nor evolving to be, yet we were created in the image of God, the divine. So communication of information has been within human capacity ever since he created us. But if we don't accept his revealed, communicated information about who he is and who we are, we don't transcend. The astral plane she was willing to think was worth humans exploring is also not transcendental for God. It is descending to communication with other created beings. Our Creator told us as humans not to engage in that type of communication. He opposes us partaking in idolatry. But Appendix B does refer to human communication and its legitimization as a scientific topic worthy of study. Now, if only the writer of Appendix B, Mr. Vickers, would agree with the Bible and the Kingdom of Speech by Tom Wolfe to delegitimize the errant theory of evolution as not being scientific. Mr. Vickers quotes Saul Gorn, stating, quote, "We spend the first year of our lives learning that we end at our skin, and all the rest of our lives learning that we don't," end quote. Yet Job and the New Testament tell us our bodies and souls are us. By God promising resurrection, we are to deny ourselves, not that we aren't individuals, but for other individuals. Deny our self-centered interest and reach out to other individuals. He seems to prefer listening, talking, and reflecting over ESP and all that. He quotes saying ESP and all that. I prefer listening and talking to others and reflecting over all that too. And he even says there are more useful says that listening, talking, and reflecting with other people are more useful than observation and experimentation to learn. I also agree with him on that. He's right to think biologists and psychologists are wrong to think mind and brain are the same thing. God created both, and they coexist while we are physically alive on earth, but the reprogramming of the mind of men by God saves us from the second death, eternal separation from God, for being unrepentant, not believing in him, not trusting him, not getting to know him, and not being thankful to be alive. So he's not necessarily changing our mind to turn away from sin and follow his Son. That is what God wants for us. But if we don't want to, he's not forcing it. Our brain and body are still going to die and decay until Jesus resurrects them when he comes back down to earth. As far as ethics in Appendix B, he's saying we've been told nothing about where ethics originate from, yet they are needed. Well, the book says they come from humans. This Changing Images of Man book says they come from humans, or maybe an astral plane, or some evolutionary cause, just completely natural. But that denies the truth that the authors of this Appendix B are somewhat closer to. Hopefully, They came to read the Bible and see how God is the source of the ethics, righteousness that we need. They go on to say, quote, the resolution or containment of conflict is not explained but simply assumed, end quote. Yep. They will avoid being conflicted against by staying above the lower evolved people. They make changes by crisis and propaganda. He says, quote, in Chapter 5, we are invited to plan the development of an ecological ethic and a self-realization ethic. From then on, we search, almost in vain, for an indication that the new image of man is to imply any sense of responsibility towards his neighbor next door, end quote. I agree. I agree with their take on it. These ethics don't guide people to feel responsible to actually care for other humans. He got the in vain part right. But the almost in vain, he was wrong. Their new ethics, new image plan totally throws out actual God-given ethics of love the Lord your God and love your neighbors as yourself. Because the search for self-actualization or fixing the world broken by sin while denying God and his word are completely in vain. And yet God will save those who call on his Son and has said he will make a new heaven and a new earth. And unfortunately for those who don't trust that and want to imagine themselves as capable of creating a better future world than God, they will selfishly actualize themselves into hell. God created hell for Satan and his angels that rebelled themselves out of heaven. He says, the author of this appendix says, quote, all this thinking lacks an adequate sociological dimension. Philosophical thinking nearly always does, end quote. But it's not thinking, it's imagining, rooted in deception, and it's hatred of wisdom, so not really philosophical, but I agree that most what's called philosophical thinking is usually that. It's imagination. Appendix C, a view of modified reductionism excerpted from The Method of Science and the Meaning of Reality by Henry Morgenau. He starts his garbled appendix with a statement that an important whether all question, then says the answer is not an unqualified yes or no. So his efforts to garble on the importance of asking a question which would have to be answered if it is actually an important question, and his only answer is that the answer is not an unqualified yes or no. He would qualify a yes or a no. What would qualify a yes or a no? And does it really matter to him? The ethics proposed in this book, according to the people proposing them, don't have to be appropriate. They can be inappropriate, but are necessary. Does this Appendix C writer agree with that view of need? Yes or no? Or ethics? Yes or no? I say no. Ethics? I say no. I don't think he agrees. I think his answer is no. Ethics, if ethical, need to be appropriate. And knowledge, in order to be knowledge, needs to not deny the truth. But at least he understood that laws of science are possibly mistaken, and even if they weren't, actual scientific knowledge is limited. But he doesn't seem to understand other non-scientific method ways for humans to obtain actual knowledge, like many people don't. At least his appendix doesn't have words in it about that. He might have understood that, I don't know. So he is humbling so-called science of biology with this. Physics, chemistry. He says, quote, there is at present no road toward a full explanation of biological effects from the domains of physics and chemistry, end quote. But then he, I think, seems somewhat arrogant when he says, quote, higher level organizational laws which will be discovered in researches on biological phenomena are likely to be sui generis, not derivable from what is known at present in the physical realm. They play an important role in our understanding of social organization, end quote. I say arrogant because he supports the knowledge that actual science is limited to observations and being observable to be made in the physical realm, yet says laws will be discovered by research in science from not the physical realm, but something else or some other realm. So more claiming to be knowledge of some kind of law and societal guidance by studying the physical world and yet no reference to the possibility for humans to know anything about non-physical truth. I would ask him to mail me a pound of logic, knowing he couldn't, but I don't trust him enough to give him my address, even if I imagined he could. And then Appendix D, Scientific Images of Man and the Man in the Street, comment by Rene Debow and David Cahoon. I agree with Debow's comment saying, quote, I am much more skeptical concerning the effects of theoretical science. I suspect a learned and sophisticated man of Greece or China 2,500 years ago would have had an image of himself and of his relation to the cosmos not very different from that of academic people in America today. As to the man in the street, I doubt that he is more concerned with this problem than was an average citizen anywhere in the Western world a few hundred years ago. End quote. Yes, I agree. Read Ecclesiastes. Ancient Greek and Chinese intellectuals had more leisure time than normal people back 2,500 years ago. And guess what? They didn't solve problems, just like academics now claim to be striving to, but typically aren't. Normal people get answers and solve problems by not thinking of themselves as highly educated, but by learning and not having time to waste imagining ways to make utopias, but work with what we have, this earth, its resources, God and his word, and each other. And humans have been human all along, never existed as something else. So these changing images authors probably should have worked on something actually possible and actually good for other people, rather than imagining the need to change people. David Cahoon says, quote, the religious and political heritage seems dominant for the popular mind, while increasingly the scientific heritage is dominant for the professional mind. End quote. He seems strongly inevitable and elitist. Why the globalists are so against populism and why progressives now would have called JFK far right. More than likely. Because academics and professionals, lawyers, stockbrokers, doctors, insurance agents, CEOs, bankers, etc., those professions that get Labor Day off while workers have to work, are far more materialistic by being liberal, only in the one sense of liberally misinterpreting the Bible and reality as a myth, and liberally giving all their lives away to causes in a universe they imagine exists for no purpose that was caused by nothing, while also concerning everything they can take from others without giving them anything but mockery, scorn, and jobs to do to fund their actually unhelpful professions. In 1982, he got this into the appendices of the book that helped bring more about what he was warning. He said, quote, we face a dangerously elitist planning and social engineering gap in the culture, where the democratic heritage would operate increasingly without power or impact. This images gap from the heritage of science will only get much larger, strongly influenced by the new astronomy, DNA, RNA, life tampering, parapsychic and meditative disciplines, biogenetics, systems analysis, antimatter worlds of flying torches, etc. End quote. The intellectual community of communications, math, cybernation, etc. will be the new priesthood of the post-industrial society, he says. I think he was right about that. He was worried about it and warning about it, and yet still got into this book. Appendix E. Some projects suited to government or foundation support. Promoting national and world awareness. Yeah, like all the nonprofits making the quote, in this house we believe woke ideology signs, or earlier celebrities and sports stars and musicians and others making people aware of cancer by stickers. This kind of awareness of things that most people have been pretty much aware of. But calling people speaking out about fluoride in water dangers of vaccines, dangers of 5G, dangers of overuse of social media, dangers of HAARP, dangers of processed food and food dyes, dangers of cloud seeding and chemtrails, and other dangerous planned global changes to help people be aware and warned. They call those type of people promoting awareness conspiracy theorists, uneducated. And they accuse those type of people, me included, of being disinformation spewers. They talk about addressing global and large-scale problems. No making up problems. Global and large-scale problems. No, they make up problems as if they are global or large-scale, such as climate change, COVID-19 pandemic, systemic racism of the United States, Islamophobia, homophobia, anti-Semitism for disagreeing with the nation-state of Israel, calling populism and national sovereignty a threat or a problem, worrying about polar bears more than aborted babies, mass genocides in Africa, but U.S. only fighting countries that threaten Israel, while Israel hasn't fought the nations killing Christians right by them in the global war on terrorism. And they are not addressing real problems. The Roman Catholic Church's pedophilia, terrorism, mass murder of Christians in Africa, Middle East, Asia, China's slavery, China's stealing individuals' records, patents, China's government autocracy enslaving their own people. All kinds of real problems they don't address. Then they go on to Appendix F, the basic paradigm of a future socio-cultural system by Virginia H. Hine. She talks about futurists creating scenarios. Evolutionary changes haven't occurred in the past. That's not her saying that. I'm saying that. Evolutionary changes haven't occurred in the past. She says, quote, most futurists assume a bureaucratic mode to be the only mechanism by which large numbers of people can be organized, end quote. They do assume, and I won't let it make an ass of you and me, hopefully. They can do that for themselves like most of what they plan to do is anyway. Jesus Christ is the Lord and Savior. We should seek to have him rule over us, not bureaucracies, not tyrants. But these environmental social movements, not the people in them necessarily, but these group ideologies are enemies of his truth. Friendship with the world is enmity with God, it says in the book of James. And there's many organizations. I'm just going to list a few. The Council on Foreign Relations, Club of Rome, Trilateral Commission, Rockefeller Foundation, the Rothschilds, Sierra Club, Urban League, NAACP, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the United Nations, World Economic Forum, the Open Society, NOW, the Freemasons, Southern Poverty Law Center, the LGBTQIA plus NPR, many colleges, Hollywood, CIA, the FBI, Mossad, MI6, almost many nonprofits, a lot of businesses, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, X, NASA, SpaceX, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, major communication hubs, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, PBS, ADL, the papacy, Jesuits, B'nai B'rith, most in Congress, if not every government official worldwide, most actors, publishers, news agencies, and so-called journalists. So-called scientists like Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson, the Church of Satan, the Bilderberg Group, most defense contractors, IBS, IBM, bankers, the Federal Reserve. Basically, all institutions and groups have bought into this idea that we need to globally change the images of man. And once again, it's like John wrote in 1 John 5:19, the whole world lieth in wickedness. So I would recommend that we pray, study the Bible, read other stuff too, pray more, do good things appropriately for others, love God, and love other people. And hopefully these changes won't come about and cause all the problems that they think they're going to solve by causing them. Thank you.